The wind in the north never stops howling. It carries whispers, secrets, and sometimes warnings. Robb Stark, king in the north, stood in the cold breeze of Winterfell, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The war had taken much from him, his father, his friends, and his peace. But something else troubled him now. Something deeper than politics, battles, or honor. Jon Snow, his half-brother, though always more like a real brother to him, was talking about leaving the north. He spoke of dragons, of Daenerys Targaryen, the last daughter of the Mad King. Jon believed she was the answer to their fight against the dead. He believed she could help save the realm, but Robb didn't trust her. Not because she was a woman, or because she had dragons, or because she was a Targaryen, but because of what power does to people. He had seen men become monsters for crowns. Women too. And fire, no matter how magical, could burn down everything if used wrong. So when Jon came to Robb that night, asking for his blessing to travel south and meet the Dragon Queen, Robb said only one word. No, Jon blinked. Why? Robb walked closer, put a hand on Jon's shoulder. Because I've seen what the South does to Northerners. It eats them alive. And you are not a politician, Jon. You are a Stark in everything but name. And Starks don't beg dragons. I'm not going to beg, Jon replied, frowning. I'm going to ask for help. The White Walkers are coming. We need her. Her dragons will not bend to our will, Robb cut him off. They bend to hers. And she won't come north just because a bastard from Winterfell asked nicely. Jon's jaw tightened. Then I'll convince her, with proof. I've seen the Night King. I know the truth. Robb turned his back to Jon and looked out at the snow falling gently. You'll be walking into a trap. What if she sees you as a threat? What if she sees our war as weakness? What if she burns everything we've built? I have to try. No, Robb said again, this time colder. As your king, I forbid it. Jon's heart sank. He had hoped that Robb would understand. But now he felt like a prisoner in his own home. I'm not your subject, Jon whispered. Not really. Robb turned, his eyes sharp. You are my brother. That means more than being my subject. But you're asking me to sit here while the world ends. I'm asking you to live. Because I've already lost too many people I love. Silence settled between them. Jon felt like the cold outside had crawled into his chest. He walked out of the hall and into the snow, his mind torn. He knew what he had to do, but now it would mean disobeying Robb, going behind his back, and maybe losing his brother forever. The next morning, Jon was gone. He left nothing behind but a note. Forgive me, Robb, I must go. For the North, for the realm, for us all. When Robb read it, he crushed the letter in his fist. A storm rose in his eyes. He had tried to protect Jon, but now he feared. He might have just pushed him toward something worse, and far to the south, in Dragonstone, Daenerys Targaryen was already dreaming of fire and snow. The north was quiet, but Robb Stark was not. When he found out Jon had left Winterfell without his permission, he felt betrayal burning in his chest. Not because Jon disobeyed a king, but because he disobeyed a brother. Robb had given him everything, trust, protection, even command during hard winters. And Jon had walked away like none of it mattered. He wanted to send riders after him, wanted to drag him back from Dragonstone, even in chains if needed. But his mother's voice rang in his head, though she was long dead. Don't make war with the ones you love. Even your anger is a form of love. So Robb stayed still. For now, but that stillness didn't last. 3 days later, a raven arrived. It wasn't from Jon. It was from the East Watch by the sea. The dead were moving. The letter was short. Just a few words. The wall will not hold forever. We've seen the White Walkers. They are close. Robb gripped the note until his knuckles went white. Jon had been right all along. The war wasn't between kings. It wasn't about thrones or names. It was about survival. And Jon was now heading to a woman who held dragons and fire in her hands. Robb cursed under his breath. Fool. You foolish brave bastard. He didn't sleep that night. His mind kept racing. What if Jon succeeded? What if Daenerys truly helped? What if they returned with fire that could burn the dead? But a darker question twisted inside him. What if Jon fell in love with her? Not just as a queen, not just as a leader, but as a woman? Robb knew his brother, knew that once Jon gave someone his loyalty, it was full, complete, unshakable. And if that loyalty turned into love, would Jon even come back? Would he still fight for the North? Or for her? That thought haunted Robb more than any ghost from beyond the wall. Meanwhile, far away on the cold sea, Jon Snow's ship battled storms. The sky cracked with lightning. The waves rose like monsters, but Jon stood on deck, wet and frozen, eyes locked on the horizon. Dragonstone was close. He remembered the last time he felt this kind of fear. It wasn't in battle. It was when he had to kill Corin Halfhand, when he had to choose duty over friendship. And now, once again, he was choosing duty over blood, over Robb. Davos stood beside him, quiet, reading Jon's face like a book. "You think he'll ever forgive you?" Davos asked. Jon didn't answer right away. He just stared at the dark sea. "I don't know," he said finally. "But I had to do this. I couldn't wait for his permission. Not while death is marching." Davos nodded. "Then be ready. Because sometimes saving people means losing them." Jon closed his eyes. He already knew. Back in Winterfell, Robb gathered his council. He told them about the message from the wall, told them about Jon's journey to Dragonstone, told them about Daenerys and her dragons. The Northern Lords grumbled. Some called Jon a traitor. Others called him a hero. Robb listened to none of it. He looked at the fire in the hearth, then at the Stark banner above his seat. The direwolf proud, alone. "If she joins us," Robb said quietly, "we may survive this war, and if she doesn't," asked Lord Umber, "then I ride south myself." The room fell silent. "You'd leave the North?" Lady Mormont asked, shocked. "I'll do what I must," Robb said, "but I won't kneel. And I won't let Jon kneel either. Not to fire, not to dragons, not to a queen who doesn't understand the cost of snow." But he was already too late, because that same night, in the hall of Dragonstone, Jon Snow stood face to face with Daenerys Stormborn. And when their eyes met, ice and fire, it was not hatred. Not fear, not even suspicion. It was recognition, something ancient, something dangerous, something neither of them could name yet. And far to the north, Robb Stark felt a cold wind pass through the window. A storm was coming, but not the one he feared, something worse. Jon Snow stood inside the great hall of Dragonstone, the flames from the torches flickering along the black stone walls. The air smelled of salt and smoke. He was soaking wet from the storm outside, but his eyes were fixed on her. Daenerys Targaryen, Queen of Dragons, the last of her name. She was not what he expected. She wasn't cruel or mad, like the story said about her father. But she wasn't soft either. She sat straight on her throne, with eyes sharp like daggers and a voice that carried more than words. Power, presence, fire. "You've come a long way," she said, "from the cold lands of the north to the fire-forged halls of Dragonstone. And yet you don't bend the knee." Jon didn't flinch. "I didn't come to bend the knee. I came to ask for help. The dead are coming. We need your dragons." Tyrion, standing beside Daenerys, gave a small smile. "He's honest." "At least there's that." Daenerys leaned forward. "And you think my army and my dragons should be risked? For a ghost story from beyond the wall?" "It's not a story," Jon said. "It's real. I've seen them. They're coming for all of us, north and south, rich or poor, king or peasant. They don't care about thrones." Daenerys was silent for a long moment. Then she stood and walked down the steps toward him. "You think I don't know death," she said softly. "I watched my brother die with melted gold on his head. I walked into a fire with dragon eggs and came out alive. I've buried people I love. I've freed slaves and watched others crucify their enemies. Don't talk to me about death, Jon Snow." He met her eyes. "Then you know what's coming. And you know it's bigger than either of us." Their eyes held each other like two swords, clashing without steel. It wasn't hate. It wasn't love. It was something dangerous, something in between. Daenerys stepped even closer. "You're not like the men who come begging for alliances. You don't want the throne. You don't even want power. You want to save people." Jon nodded. "Because no one else will." She stared at him. Something in her heart moved, just a little. "Prove it," she said. "Show me the dead." Jon looked at Tyrion, then back at her. Then let me go beyond the wall and bring one back. Daenerys's eyes widened. You'd risk your life for that? Jon's voice was calm. I've already died once. What's one more time? Far in the north, Robb Stark stood in the godswood, the snow falling like ash. His breath was heavy. His thoughts darker than the sky. He'd heard nothing from Jon, no raven, no word, and it twisted something inside him. Arya came to him quietly. She'd returned to Winterfell just days ago, changed, older, colder, but still Arya. You miss him, she said. Robb didn't answer. I miss him too, she whispered. But we both know Jon does what he believes is right, even if it kills him. That's what I'm afraid of, Robb said. She looked at him with those sharp, stark eyes. You're not angry because he left. You're angry because he didn't trust you with the truth. Robb looked at her. She wasn't a little girl anymore. She understood things now, things only wolves could feel. I didn't want him to follow fire, Robb admitted. But maybe he was chasing something else. Hope? Arya asked. No, Robb said slowly. Destiny. In the silence of Dragonstone's night, Daenerys stood on her balcony, looking out over the dark sea. She should have sent Jon away, should have burned the letter he brought about the dead. But she couldn't, because when he spoke, he sounded like someone who carried truth on his back, like someone who had seen too much and still chose to fight, like someone she could trust. She hated that feeling. Tyrion came up beside her. He's not like other men, Daenerys nodded. He doesn't want me for my throne. Or your dragons, Tyrion added. No, she said, almost whispering. He wants to save the world. And that scares me more than anything, because deep down, she already knew. This wasn't just about war. It wasn't even about the dead. It was about what happens when fire meets snow. The cold beyond the wall was different from Winterfell. It wasn't just snow and ice. It was silence. A silence so deep it made men forget who they were. Jon Snow rode with a small group, Tormund Giant's Bane, Jorah Mormont Gendry, Beric Dondarrion, Thoros of Myr, and a few brothers from the Night's Watch. They all had the same mission, capture one of the dead and bring it to Dragonstone to prove their threat was real. But the deeper they went, the heavier the air became. Even the snow seemed afraid to fall here. Jon stopped for a moment, looking out at the white, empty land stretching ahead. Tormund came up beside him. This is madness, you know. Jon didn't look at him. Then why did you come? Tormund grinned through his red beard. Because you're even more stupid than brave. And I like that, Jon gave a weak smile. But inside, he was already thinking of Robb. Would his brother ever forgive him if he died out here? Or worse, if he lived and brought fire into their world? Back in Winterfell, Robb stood in front of a raven cage, holding a letter from the Night's Watch. Jon has gone beyond the wall, it said. He seeks proof of the dead. Robb stared at the paper for a long time. He didn't move, didn't blink. Just stood there with 1,000 storms in his eyes. Arya entered quietly, carrying her sword, needle. You're going after him, she said. Robb nodded. He went alone, and he may not return. If he dies out there, we lose more than a brother. We lose the one man people still believe in. And if he brings proof? Arya asked. Robb looked at her. Then the South will want him. Daenerys will want him. Arya understood. You still don't trust her. Robb's jaw tightened. I trust no one who commands dragons and calls herself queen before proving she deserves it. Maybe she'll prove it, Arya said. Maybe, Robb replied, mounting his horse. But I won't risk Jon's life on maybes. He left Winterfell with a group of his best men. Not to fight, not to kneel, but to bring his brother back before the cold swallowed him forever. Far beyond the wall, Jon and his group found what they were looking for, a small group of the dead, marching in silence through the snow. They set a trap and attacked quickly, killing the whites and capturing one, but then the scream came. A horrible, high-pitched cry, like a horn blown in hell. It echoed across the ice, and then the army arrived, thousands of the dead, led by White Walkers on undead horses. The ground shook beneath them, and the sky turned grey. Jon and the others ran, dragging the captured White with them. They made it to a frozen lake, and the ice cracked under their boots. Surrounded, they stood on a small island in the center, the dead unable to cross without falling through the thin ice. It was a trap, but also a prison. They were stuck. Thoros was already dying from a wound. Gendry was sent back alone to run for help. The others prepared to die. Jon stood at the edge of the rock, Longclaw in his hand, his breath coming out in clouds. "If this is the end," Jorah said, "you died trying to save the world." Jon didn't reply. He was thinking of Robb, of Winterfell, of snow falling on warm stone. He didn't want to die here. Back at Dragonstone, Daenerys received Gendry's message. Jon was trapped beyond the wall. Her heart tightened like a fist. Tyrion warned her not to go. "If you die, everything is lost. You are the last Targaryen," but she didn't care. She mounted Drogon, and with her other two dragons, Rhaegal and Viserion, she flew north like a storm of fire and wings. Robb Stark reached Eastwatch just as Gendry collapsed at the gates. He heard everything, and his face turned to stone. "They're trapped on a lake?" he asked. "Yes," the guard said. "Surrounded by the dead." Without waiting, Robb turned his horse. "Then I'm going to get him, alone," Arya asked, arriving beside him. "I'm his brother," Robb said. "If he has to die, it won't be alone." And so, two storms were riding north, one on dragon wings, the other on wolf's blood. But neither of them knew. The Night King was watching, waiting, and he had plans for both. The cold on the frozen lake was sharp enough to cut skin. Jon stood with his sword ready, the dead watching them from all sides. They hadn't attacked yet. They were waiting, patient, endless, a nightmare that never got tired. Thoros had died during the night, frozen stiff beside the fire. They burned his body with what little oil they had. His last words were a weak laugh and a whisper. Something about fire always winning. Jon didn't know how long they'd been stuck here. Maybe 2 days, maybe 3. Time meant nothing in the land of the dead. Tormund grunted beside him. "I'd rather die swinging than freeze like a fish on ice." Jon didn't answer. His eyes kept scanning the sky. He wasn't hoping for miracles, but then they heard it, a deep, echoing roar. At first the dead didn't move, but the living did. Eyes turning upward, wide with shock. Out of the clouds fire exploded. Drogon crashed down like thunder, flames spilling from his mouth, burning hundreds of wights at once. The other dragons came right after, Rhaegal swooping low, claws slicing the dead, and Viserion circling above like a god of war. On Drogon's back sat Daenerys Targaryen, her silver hair blowing in the wind, eyes blazing with fury. She didn't wait. She shouted, and Drogon spun around, burning a path through the frozen army. Jon stared in disbelief. He hadn't expected her to come. He didn't know she would risk everything. But she did. "Get on!" she screamed. One by one, the survivors rushed to Drogon's side. Tormund, Jorah, Beric. Even the captured wight was tied down. Jon turned to follow. But just then, the ice cracked. A White Walker had thrown a spear. It missed the dragon, but it sent a warning. Jon turned back, swinging his sword as the dead surged forward. He fought them back, yelling at Daenerys to leave. "Go now! I won't leave you!" she shouted back. But then it happened. A second spear flew, clean, deadly, cruel, and it struck Viserion in the neck. The dragon screamed, blood and fire pouring from its throat as it crashed into the ice with a thunderous explosion. Daenerys watched, frozen in horror, as one of her children died before her eyes. Jon roared in rage and kept fighting. But the ice was giving way. The dead were closing in again. There was no more time. Jorah pulled Daenerys back. "We have to leave now." She shook her head, tears frozen to her cheeks. "Not without him. Now!" he shouted. Drogon lifted into the air, heavy with survivors. As the dead reached the edge, Jon struck down one last wight, then slipped beneath the ice. Robb Stark arrived too late. From the cliffs above, he saw the dragon fall. He saw the dead drag Jon's body into the water, and he saw a queen screaming into the wind. He didn't ride forward. He stood still, breathing hard, the cold cutting into him. Arya came up beside him. "Jon?" Robb couldn't answer. He just stared. A part of him wanted to scream. Another part wanted to ride down and die with his brother. But he knew Jon was not ordinary, and he was right, under the ice. Jon's eyes opened. Blue light glowed from above. He fought to swim up, his chest burning. A sword of fire in his hand, only in his mind. He kicked, clawed, gasped, and broke through the ice. He crawled out, coughing, shivering, barely alive. Somehow, the dead didn't see him. They were too focused on the dragon. They were pulling Viserion's broken body out of the water. Jon watched from behind a rock, half conscious. And then he saw it, the Night King, tall, pale, eyes like death. He walked up to the dragon, whispered something no one could hear, and then Viserion's eye opened, blue, burning, dead. Jon stared in horror. The Night King had taken a dragon, and now the North had lost more than just a brother. It had lost the sky. Back at Eastwatch, Robb helped carry the survivors inside. Daenerys stood beside the fire, silent, empty. He stayed behind, she whispered. He told me to fly. Robb didn't respond. Then she looked up at him. You're Robb Stark, aren't you? Yes. You tried to stop him. I did. And now... He looked at her with tired eyes. Now I'll burn the world to bring him home. Jon didn't remember how long he had crawled through the snow. Every breath felt like knives in his chest. His skin was turning blue. His fingers were stiff, his sword half buried in the snow behind him. But somehow he was still alive. His body shook from the cold, but he kept moving, dragging himself across the ice like a dying animal. Just as he was about to collapse again, a horse's hooves broke through the silence. Benjen Stark, half dead, half alive, a face from the past that Jon thought he'd never see again. Benjen rode straight toward him, jumped down and lifted Jon with surprising strength. You're not dying today, Jon Snow, he said, wrapping a cloak around him. But you... Jon tried to speak, his voice barely a whisper. There's no time. Benjen placed Jon on the horse and slapped its side, sending it galloping toward the wall. He stayed behind. As Jon looked back through half-shut eyes, the last thing he saw was Benjen fighting the dead alone, disappearing into the snowstorm. At Eastwatch, Robb sat in a stone room, staring at the fire. His clothes were still wet with snow. His jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Daenerys stood by the window silent. She hadn't spoken since they arrived. Not to him, not to anyone. Then a horn blew, a rider. The gates opened and the horse came in, carrying a half-dead man, slumped forward. Jon Robb was the first to run. He grabbed his brother before he could fall and lowered him gently to the ground. Jon, can you hear me? Jon's lips moved slowly. Robb? I'm here. Daenerys pushed past the guards, dropping to her knees beside them. She reached for Jon's face. You're alive. Jon looked up at her, barely awake, and saw something in her eyes. Pain, grief, something soft behind the fire. I'm sorry. About Viserion, he whispered. Her hands trembled, but she nodded. So am I. Robb stood silently beside them, his face unreadable. Later that night, Jon was resting in a small room lit by lanterns. He slept heavily, bandaged and bruised. Daenerys sat beside him, while Robb leaned against the wall, arms crossed. For the first time, they were alone. You blame me, she said quietly. Robb didn't answer. You think I brought him into this, she added. He looked at her finally. You didn't. He came on his own. But I let him go beyond the wall. I risked everything. And I lost a dragon. You didn't lose a dragon, Robb said coldly. You gave the enemy the most powerful weapon in the world. Daenerys looked away, guilt tightening her chest. I had to save him. Robb stepped closer, his voice like ice. You cared about him. That much is clear. But caring doesn't mean you understand what he's fighting for. Jon isn't a pawn in your war, and he's not a name to add to your army. Daenerys stood now, fire rising in her voice. And you think I don't understand loss? I lost one of my children for him. Robb's eyes flared. He's my brother, my blood. And if he dies following you, I'll burn every city between here and King's Landing. They stood inches apart. King and queen, wolf and dragon, both hurting, both afraid to admit what they already knew. They needed each other. The next morning, Jon woke to the sound of a heated argument outside. He struggled to sit up, pulling the furs tighter around his body. The door opened, and Arya slipped in with a soft smile. "You're a fool, Jon Snow," he chuckled weakly. "That's nothing new. You almost died again." "I came back." Arya sat beside him. "Daenerys saved you. I know. And Robb is ready to fight the entire South because of it." Jon sighed. "They hate each other." Arya smiled sadly. "Not hate, fear. They're both afraid of what they'll lose if they trust the other." Jon looked at the ceiling, thinking, "We can't afford that." "Not now. Then make them listen," Arya whispered. Outside, on the frozen cliffs of Eastwatch, the sky was turning black with clouds. The Night King stood near the wall, his new weapon by his side. Viserion, undead, blue-eyed, winged death. The Night King raised one hand and pointed toward the sky. Viserion screamed, and with one beat of his wings he rose. Flames burst from his mouth, but not fire. Blue fire, cold fire, death fire. The wall shook, then it cracked. A piece of the wall collapsed with a roar that echoed for miles. The dead began to march south, and now no wall would stop them, only the living, if they could unite. The wall had fallen, not in fire but in cold fire, the kind that didn't burn. It froze, shattered, and killed hope. Robb Stark stood on the battlements of Eastwatch, his eyes locked on the broken piece of the wall far in the distance. Smoke and ice filled the air like ghosts. The wind carried the smell of death. He didn't speak. He didn't move. Beside him, Daenerys watched too, her face pale, her eyes wide. "The dead are marching," she said softly. "And now, they have a dragon." Robb said nothing. His fists were clenched. His jaw was tight. For a moment he looked like his father, Eddard Stark, before battle. Jon Snow entered slowly, wrapped in heavy furs, still weak, but standing. Arya helped him, and Ghost walked quietly by his side. "We don't have time to argue anymore," Jon said. "They're coming. We fight together now, or we all die." Daenerys looked at him. "Then we must take the fight south. Rally the living. Speak to Cersei. Force her to see reason." Robb turned to her sharply. "You want to trust the woman who murdered half your family? You want to parley with the lion while the wolf bleeds?" "She has an army," Daenerys replied, "and I have 2 dragons left. But even that may not be enough. We need her men. If we show her the white, maybe she'll join the fight." Robb's voice was cold. "And when she stabs you in the back during that same meeting?" Jon stepped forward. "Then we'll be ready." Robb stared at him. "You're risking your life again." "For a gamble. I'm already risking it every time I breathe," Jon said. "The dead are not stopping. We can't afford pride anymore. Not yours, not hers, not even mine." There was silence. Arya spoke next. "He's right. Cersei is a liar, but if she sees what we saw, she'll have no choice." Daenerys nodded slowly. "We'll go to King's Landing. Show her the dead. Give her a choice." Robb finally looked away from the shattered wall. "Fine, but I swear this. Jon, if anything happens to you because of her, I will kill her myself." They rode south, not with banners or songs, but with heavy hearts and cold silence. Jon led them, riding slowly with Daenerys beside him. They barely spoke, but every glance between them carried more meaning than words. Robb rode behind them, watching. He saw the way Jon looked at her, and how she looked at Jon. There was fire there, soft, growing fire, and it scared him, because love made men weak, love made men blind, and in war, blindness killed more than swords ever did. King's Landing loomed ahead, dark, cruel, and proud. Its towers touched the sky like claws. The Red Keep stood above it all, like a queen on a throne of knives. Cersei Lannister waited inside, her face calm but her mind racing. She already knew of the wall, of the dragon, of the dead, but she had plans of her own. "If they come begging for peace," she told Jaime, "I'll listen, but I won't bend. And when the dead are done with them, I'll take what's left." Jaime looked at her, troubled. "If you saw what I saw, you wouldn't talk like this." "I saw our father crushed by mercy," she snapped. "I won't make that mistake." The meeting was set in the dragon pit, neutral ground. Open sky, no shadows to hide behind. Jon, Daenerys, Robb, Tyrion, Arya, and their guards waited in silence. Cersei entered in black, her face cold as stone. Jaime followed, his eyes darting toward Jon and Robb. The dead white was brought in a wooden box. Jon stepped forward. He opened the box. Nothing happened. Cersei smirked. A trick? I expected more. Then suddenly it screamed. The white burst forward, snapping chains, crawling toward Cersei with lifeless hunger. Her guards panicked. Jaime reached for his sword. Even Cersei stepped back, eyes wide. Jon grabbed a dragonglass blade and sliced it down, cutting off the white's arm. Then he burned it. Dead silence followed. You wanted proof, Jon said, breathing hard. Now you have it. Cersei looked at them, her voice calm again. Very well. I will fight with you until the war is done. But Robb saw something in her eyes, a lie. That night Robb sat alone, sharpening his sword. Daenerys entered quietly. You still don't trust her? He didn't look up. Because I've seen snakes before. They smile when they bite. She agreed to the truce. No, Robb said darkly. She agreed to survive long enough to betray us later. Daenerys sat across from him. And what do you see when you look at me? Robb met her eyes. A queen with fire in her heart. And a storm behind her eyes. She didn't smile. And if I hurt Jon, he stood, then the storm you started will become a war even dragons can't stop, far beyond them. In the north, the dead marched onward, and above them all, Viserion flew under the Night Kings. Control, blue fire spilling from his mouth like judgment from the gods. The Great War was no longer coming, it was here. The snow fell thick over the fields of Winterfell, but it wasn't peaceful snow. It came with screams, with fire, with the sound of bones cracking beneath boots. The dead had arrived. The army of the Night King stretched far across the white landscape, thousands of whites, White Walkers on skeletal horses, and above all Viserion, no longer a dragon of life, but a creature of death. Jon Snow stood on the walls of Winterfell, watching them approach. His sword, Longclaw, was strapped to his back. Ghost stood by his side, growling low. He looked behind him. Daenerys was already mounted on Drogon, flying low. Rhaegal followed behind her, his green wings cutting through the grey sky. Robb Stark stood at the gate with Arya, armored in black fur and steel. His face was calm, but his eyes burned with something deeper, not fear, rage. The battle began before dawn. The Unsullied held the front lines. The North stood behind them, axes and arrows ready. The dragons soared above, breathing fire across the snow, burning hundreds of whites in each pass. But the dead didn't stop. They never stopped. Viserion came from the clouds, his cold blue fire tearing through towers and walls. One blast shattered a watchtower, killing 20 men in seconds. Jon rode toward him on Rhaegal, steel in his grip, heart in his throat. He didn't want to kill the dragon. He had to. High in the sky, dragon met dragon. Rhaegal slammed into Viserion with all his weight, claws digging into rotting scales. The two beasts roared and twisted above Winterfell like two gods at war. On the ground, Robb fought like a man possessed. He cut through the dead with brutal strikes, protecting Arya's flank. Every time he saw a White Walker, he charged without hesitation. He wasn't fighting for glory. He was fighting for Jon, for their home, for the last hope of the living. But deep down, a fear still burned in his chest. What if even this wasn't enough? In the heart of Winterfell, Jon and Daenerys landed side by side. The Night King had entered the courtyard, walking with slow, steady steps, calm, like death itself. Daenerys raised her hand. "Dracarys," she shouted. Drogon let loose a wall of fire, burning everything in its path. The flames swallowed the Night King completely. For a moment no one breathed, and then he stepped through the fire, alive, unburned, his blue eyes locked with Daenerys's. No fear, no emotion. Jon stepped forward, sword raised. The Night King lifted his hand. The dead rose all around them, whites from the battlefield, fallen warriors from the north. Even soldiers Daenerys had just lost. They were surrounded. Robb burst into the courtyard, blood on his armor. "Jon!" Jon saw him and shouted, "Get Daenerys out of here!" "I'm not leaving you," she screamed. "You have to!" Jon shouted. "You're the queen. If we fall, you're the last light." Robb grabbed her arm. "He's right." You ride now." With one last look at Jon, Daenerys mounted Drogon and flew. The Night King watched her go and smiled. Inside the Godswood, Arya moved like a shadow. She had one goal, one chance. The Night King's army had breached the gates. Winterfell was falling. But Bran, now the three-eyed raven, sat quietly under the old weirwood tree. Arya saw him. Surrounded by whites, she ran, silently, deadly. She jumped from the shadows. Valyrian's steel dagger in her hand. One White Walker turned, too slow. She stabbed it in the throat. It shattered into ice. She didn't stop. She kept running, toward Bran, toward the center, and then she saw him, the Night King, walking slowly, calmly ready to strike Bran down. Arya screamed. Jumped high, he caught her by the throat, dropped her dagger, but she caught it with her other hand and stabbed him, right in the heart. The Night King's body froze. His face cracked, and he shattered into 1,000 pieces. In an instant, the dead collapsed. The battlefield went silent. The war was over. Winterfell stood, but barely. Smoke rose from its towers. Blood soaked the snow. The cost was beyond counting. Jon sat alone in the courtyard, body covered in cuts and bruises. Ghost lay beside him, still alive. Arya came up beside him, silent. They didn't need words. Robb approached from the ruins, blood on his hands, but alive. Daenerys landed behind them, dismounting from Drogon. Her eyes were tired, but still burning. The four stood in the courtyard, quiet. Finally, Robb looked at her. "You saved him," he said. She nodded. "You still don't have my trust," he added. "But you have my respect." Daenerys looked at Jon. "And do I have yours?" Jon smiled faintly. "You have more than that." Later in the great hall they lit a fire, not for warmth, but for the dead. Jon spoke softly. "We won, but not alone. Not by swords, not by dragons, by trust," Robb nodded. "And by doing what Starks do best, we protect the living." Daenerys stood beside them. "And now, we rebuild." Far beyond the fire in the broken lands of the north, nothing moved. No whites, no walkers, no fire, just silence. But deep under the ice, something ancient still stirred, waiting, because even in victory, winter always returns.